Welcome to Insert Innovation. I'm your host, Benjamin Janey. And for audience out there, this is the first time that you've logged into this podcast. Insert Innovation is a student-run podcast at Chapman University, and it seeks to inspire and help cultivate the next generation of innovators and disruptors. And today, our special guest is Nick Spiller. Nick, how are you today?
Doing well, Ben. Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. So Nick is a VC and is originally from Michigan. Nick is a University of Texas alumni, founding director of Longhorn Entrepreneurship Directory. After college, Nick actually worked in a startup space, saw some early success there. He started his career as a VC by joining Capital Factory, his venture team in 2016. Since he's joined Capital Factory, he's invested in over 50 deals, making Capital Factory one of the most active investors actually in Texas. So quite a bit of a resume there, sir.
Quite the time here in Austin the last 15 years since I came down to attend the University of Texas, and seems like the best is yet in front of us.
Totally agree. Nick, so we like to start these conversations off by having our guests just talk a little bit about, your background in your field and how you got started.
Happy to. I was born an hour north of Detroit in Flint, Michigan, McLaren Hospital, and grew up in Genesee County there, played ice hockey, golf, always had an interest in business, but entrepreneurship wasn't really a common topic in southeastern Michigan where I grew up, and probably like a lot of places back then, there weren't startup communities or VC funds in the news. In Silicon Valley there were, in New York there were, but it hadn't really expanded much beyond the coast. In 2009, I was lucky enough to receive admission into the University of Texas. I moved down originally intending to go to medical school. I was a psychology major. Very quickly decided I wanted to pursue business because I wanted to improve healthcare at the time. I'm still very focused in healthcare at Capital Factory, but more than that. But at the time, it's really just how do I improve people's lives through medicine, through other ways to improve your well-being. And I realized pretty quickly at UT that being a physician is not the position to do that. Physicians operate in a very specific box. They have to do it by the book. And if they don't, they expose themselves to significant legal risks and other things. And so you just can't innovate in some positions, some jobs, physicians being one of them. And if you want to innovate in healthcare, it can help to be a physician, no doubt, but you need to be an entrepreneur. You need to be part of some sort of organization, institution that's actually administering and developing the healthcare system, right? And so that's where a lot of the innovation actually happens, is within the system that then ultimately delivers the healthcare that the people receive. So anyways, ended up trying to get into the business school, didn't have good enough grades in calculus, and decided to become a rhetoric and writing major instead. That's was a stroke of luck because the rhetoric and writing major took a lot less time when it came to homework and studying for exams, and that enabled me to get involved in startups. And that ultimately was the real degree and the real learning that I got out of my time at the University of Texas. It's also where I met Josh Baer, who's the CEO of Capital Factory, the founder of Capital Factory, taking his class, Longhorn Startup. And that happened to be the year I moved to Texas, was the same year that Josh started Capital Factory, and got involved in the community back then, and been just enthralled in it ever since. So yeah, that's how I got my start in it. And it's been great to have you down here, by the way, and get you plugged in the community as well, Ben, at South by, and I think you came to Austin.
That's really a great story. And I can vouch obviously for the impact that you're having with startups in Austin. Being a founder myself, obviously involved as a portfolio company of Capital Factory with Spooler. I didn't know that you had the background in healthcare, so I'm learning something new today, also about your professional trajectory, which is quite impressive. So the next part of the podcast, we have user-generated questions from the business students here about innovation. So we want to probe our guests to gain inspiration for students in helping to define what innovation is, how innovation helps perhaps overcome a challenge in business. Where do we see innovation happening in your specific industry? Where do we see happening in technology and AI and all the developments that we're bombarded with throughout the day in our everyday lives? So the first question we have is, in your own words, how would you define innovation?
Innovation is the process of applying inventions and technology and solutions to real world problems. One of my mentors, Bob Metcalf, I think he made this up. Maybe he got it from someone else, but I'm pretty sure it was Metcalf's quote who said, "Invention is a flower, innovation is a weed."
I like that.
Right. And so you have these great inventions that often occur at universities or maybe in your garage, and that's beautiful, but it's not innovation until you go through the process of getting people to adopt that technology, use it to actually create value. And that's when it becomes innovation. And what I've learned, to double click on that, I've learned that a lot of people love innovation until they're innovated upon. And that's the tricky part. Why it's a weed is that actually changing the way people work. And sometimes if even it's certainly a objective improvement can be faced with friction from the status quo.
Yeah. Now, in what ways has innovation played a role in your career or helped you attain goals in life?
All the time. And I think there's innovation is something that happens constantly, and you're chipping away. It's a lot like mining for a resource. You have to refine it, or discovering a new process. You have to experiment and gather feedback and learn from that endeavor, and it won't be perfect. And most people from the normal business world would look at that on the surface and say, "Hey, that's subpar, or that's a bad idea." But you actually have to go through that. And so I've done that through probably 8 or 9 different businesses that I have received, that I've gone out and created and received first customers of. I actually generated revenue for in a MVP format that I never raised money for, never really turned into a company, but I just wanted to experiment with a business idea and see if you can get people to pay for it and deliver for it. For example, out of college, we started a experiment called Impromptu, and we allowed you to dine at any restaurant in Austin without waiting or making a reservation. And you could send our dinner concierge a text message at 6 p.m. on a Friday night and say, "I want to go to Uchi, the top restaurant in Austin, at 8 p.m. And we would go deliver that. Or we would try to deliver that as a service, and we use different tactics to go down and reserve tables ahead of time. We would make arrangements with the hostess, with the restaurant managers, and we would do a lot in the back end. And so it never really turned into a business, but we had probably 20 or 30 people that pushed, went out there, paid for that service, and so yeah, I think that's in a lot of ways it's little experiments like that no one ever knows that aren't on my LinkedIn that have happened, and just the amount you learn, the amount I learned about restaurants and how people think. And I learned a lot specifically about Amex's concierge services is what that kind of led me to, and some of these credit cards, and allow you to get reservations and exclusive access to places based on status, and basically because like I'm someone who spends a lot of money, or you're someone that spends a lot of money, and therefore you can kind of get the status.
Wow, that's an interesting solution, and a good segue into the next question. I think I read somewhere Bill Gates, what he kind of generates his best ideas by taking a vacation in the woods or in a cabin where he has space to think and to innovate. Now, do you have a process for coming up with solutions and ideas?
At this point, it's really just relying on my perspective as an investor.
Mhm.
I mentioned I had invested in 50 companies through Capital Factory. I can't remember where we exactly got that number from, but I've certainly been involved with that. I mean, Capital Factory, we've almost invested in 1,000 companies. We have a portfolio of almost 1,000 companies. I've been involved with a lot. We have a whole team that runs that deal flow, but I've seen more than half of those decisions get made. And so that gives me a huge advantage seeing what innovators are building in all different industries. That's the other thing. It's, we're very agnostic. We're looking at all these different industries, from things like spooler to hypersonic airplanes that can fly you across the world in an hour.
Yeah.
And so I rely on ideas I've seen in one space to come up with solutions in another space. And I'm not in the mode of actually creating the solutions. I'm more working
Yourself. Yeah.
but whenever I talk to an entrepreneur, I'm trying to make a valuable connection based on that perspective. And I'll usually ask a question that kind of leads them towards that idea. Just to, try to share my perspective. So, but yeah, I think it's kind of like trying to mix and match the different frontier technologies each industry is negotiating with right now.
Right. So you're listening to a lot of innovative ideas, probably a daily basis. I can only imagine like what your LinkedIn inbox looks like, like startups sliding in with a pitch deck or with their business ideas and try to get Capital Factory you on board with it. Can you tell us about a time when, as an investor, you might have thought of a better way assessing a deal that used some sort of innovative approach or software or technology?
Well, I think Capital Factory itself is a good example of that. We're quite different than most traditional venture firms. We do have a venture business. We've been the most active VC investor in Texas for over 10 years now. And we don't write the biggest checks. We don't invest the most money, but we write the most checks. So very, very active in that sense. But the way we're able to do that is through this ecosystem we've built, or the Capital Factory platform, which is centered around this place in downtown Austin, this burgeoning tech hub. And people are coming from all over the world to visit us, and we create the welcome mat for that. And that was the first step, but that brought everyone to us, and which is far more efficient than traveling around. And then we also created activities. We do activities within Capital Factory where entrepreneurs get value, talking to a mentor, pitching investors, pitching a corporate partner. We also get data on a company that doesn't have financial history, right? So, and so like a lot of ways, while the ecosystem that we've built that wouldn't be there without Capital Factory's business model, it is valuable in and of itself to the startup community. Therefore, people engage with it, and you can get a co-working membership, you can get a corporate membership. There's different levels, but that is really become a data platform for us as investors, to where I just walk through the building, I see who's meeting with who's coming in early, who books a bunch of conference rooms and is like doing stuff with their team, and then then on the other hand, it's like who only shows up when they're about to go raise money, who gets defensive when I ask a question that they think is like not smart enough or something. So yeah, we get a lot of soft data on these startups that like regular investors don't get if they're just getting pitched, right? And they're just sitting down and they're getting the presentation, which is the kind of the best version of a startup. We get under the hood through this ecosystem we've built.
Now, are all these startups that are able to come to the Capital Factory Hub or HQ, are they portfolio companies, or can community or startups in the Austin community find their way into that ecosystem without already being vetted as a portfolio company?
Our mission is always to build has always been to build a platform that every entrepreneur can get value from.
Gotcha.
And there's different ways to do that. Certainly the portfolio companies get the most value. They get all access to Capital Factory, we say. But there's events every night. There's meetups, anything geeky you'll see on meetup.com, or the local pitch competitions often will be held at Capital Factory.
Yeah.
That's usually how people discover us. Or first, like, they kind of think we're an event space, an event venue, or co-working space, and they often are surprised that we're a venture investor. And that's a bit by design. Allows us to we get to know people in a more authentic way, because they're not coming in thinking, oh, I gotta put on my best front and like puff my chest out for the investors. It's like, no, we're coming in and just, like coming to an AI meetup and drinking beer and pizza and hanging out. But it's like I'm sitting in the corner and seeing like who are the leaders in the room, who's bringing the big ideas. So yeah, it's a fun. I think it's a fun way to invest, no doubt. And I think it gives us unique data to make these decisions upon.
Now, can you tell us about a time where maybe as an investor, you encountered an entrepreneur or startup that may have been facing a challenge and had to find a better way to, let's say, transform their plan into more of a viable idea? Maybe there was a market change, maybe a team member left their startup. Have you ever encountered any unique entrepreneurs or founders that have been using innovation to help solve problems and come up with solutions in their startups?
Every day, it's one of the amazing parts about being a VC is the people that find you or folks that think they can go create the next Facebook. And
Yeah.
whether or not that's true, it's awesome mentality to engage with, and it's very positive, optimistic thing. So, one that comes to mind is Apptronic. It's one of our leading portfolio companies. We've invested more money in this company than any other company. I think we first got involved with them in 2017, and they've always had the vision to build the iPhone for robots. We have 1,000 robots right now that do one thing. This is one robot that'll do 1,000 things. It's in a humanoid fashion.
Yeah. Yes.
Have you seen the robot I'm talking about, Ben?
No, but I can visualize where you're talking about, and it sounds pretty fascinating.
It's pretty sick. You can go to apptronic.com to see Apollo, who's now a humanoid robot they've launched and are delivering to customers like Mercedes, and have been integrated into different AI platforms like NVIDIA's. But they 10 years ago when we got involved with them, almost 10 years ago when they started, there wasn't an appetite for humanoid robotics. There was barely an appetite for hardware startups.
Right.
And so you couldn't really just go right into it. They didn't have anyone just give them $50 million and build it out until the market was there. So they were able to get a series of government grants from groups like NASA and the Department of Defense, other places that allowed them to develop components of the ultimate platform, right? So I think their first business was an actuator business, and they just like, it was just the piece that moves the different parts of the robot, kind of like the joint, if you will, of a robot. So the actuator business, and they were, I think, doing 30,000 a month, 50,000 a month in that business.
Wow.
But it's not a unicorn style business.
Right.
But it got them started. They developed some tech. They got some other awards they won. I think it was the DARPA Robotics Challenge was like the first one they got. So it was a humanoid exoskeleton. So they were able to do these one-off projects, but like kind of consulting projects, which you might think of like, oh, like I'm a VC-backed company, I don't want to do consulting, but sometimes you need to consult or do research projects or government projects to achieve milestones before you could really get the venture funding.
That's right.
And this company was able to do that for about 5 to 10 years until the market really hit it. Now they've been able to raise quite a bit of money, and you're seeing a lot of robotics and hardware getting funded by venture investors. They raised a bunch of money. I think are going to continue to do it in the future. So, Apptronic is a really good story. APPTRONIK is how you spell that.
Amazing. And so it sounds like They got R&D grants from the government,
Yeah, different prizes, and non-dilutive funding is what we would.
non-dilutive funding. Yeah,
And it was, but and they, each one of those projects wasn't directly aimed at the North Star, but it was a
yeah,
building block to get there, and they were
yeah,
able to develop the technology, develop the IP,
right.
even some business processes until have now been able to launch Apollo, the humanoid robot.
Yeah.
Like Mercedes-Benz has announced they're going to be using these robots on the assembly line to build your Benz.
Amazing. Now, did they have the vision from day one and needed to sort of go through these different phases in order to get to where they are today? Or did they have to change their model at all throughout the
I think they really had that
vision from day one? Sounds like. Yeah.
almost pretty much day one from what I
Yeah.
understand, since we started talking to them in 2017. Yeah, so I think it has been, and there's been humanoid robotics before, by the way. They just cost a lot of money. The idea here is it's mass producible, and you can buy lots of them.
Wow. Now, I think that actually is a good segue to the next question. And thank you for sharing that. That is absolutely fascinating. Now, what inventions or innovations do you think will shake up VC in the next 5 years?
Next 5 years,
The next 5 years.
probably the biggest one is semiconductors.
Mhm.
Advanced semiconductors. You have a couple different dynamics. The AI boom is upon us. It's pushed the GPUs and the computes of these chips very, very hard. You
Mhm.
also have a geopolitical environment where the US is pulling back from manufacturing these in Asia, and investing in manufacturing semiconductors, specifically advanced semiconductors here in the United States.
Yeah.
And if you look at any of the politics around Taiwan and the Taiwan Semiconductor, TSMC, I think is the company's fascinating story. It goes back decades. It's defined the whole digital revolution.
Yeah.
And we're at a pretty key junction here around that. And so the CHIPS Act, a lot of people are familiar with, gave a lot of funding to advanced semiconductors through the government here. Most notably, just came out, I think a week or two ago, DARPA awarded almost $1 billion to the University of Texas to develop a advanced semiconductor manufacturing center here in Austin. Samsung's announced $1 billion semiconductor facility here in Austin as well, and all over. So we're seeing, I think chips are a big thing. And yeah, I think it hasn't quite hit the turning point. There's a lot of the basic infrastructure that needs to go, but once these manufacturing centers are open and the cost comes down to run this stuff and build this stuff stateside, then you'll see a lot more startups entering the space and developing crazy, unique chips that can do awesome computations and advance all the stuff we're doing. Because it's the AI, generative AI is cool. It's expensive, it uses a lot of compute. It's taken, like, the way they do it is a brute force approach, using this kind of graphics cards to do just basic computing, when the graphics cards were really just built for they're built for gaming. That
Right.
which is big a huge driver. The gaming is the biggest driver of semiconductors and all this stuff. It just happens to get applied to these other areas along the way.
Wow. Now, is robotics in that sort of growth, in a growth trajectory in the next 5 years too?
Yeah, and robotics is more of a slow burn.
Slow burn. Okay.
But as the cost of chips go down, as AI prevails, I think, like, you'll see robotics. I think what's pushing a lot of robotics is there's actually a job shortage in a lot of blue collar industries, manufacturing jobs.
Yeah.
There's just, like, the Aptronic team calls it the dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs people don't really want. We really need.
That's right.
That's driving a lot of robotics and automation.
Right.
So Drones are big.
Yeah.
Drones, I think, will continue have exploded and will continue to be used in different ways, all shapes and sizes.
Wow. Yeah, I just got back from South Korea last week and with the business school, and we visited a Hyundai manufacturing facility, and it was mind blowing to see the development in robotics and how they've implemented that into car manufacturing. It was just, we were all just blown away, and how fast that market is accelerating in foreign markets as well outside the US.
Yeah, so there's like structured robotics. Kiva Robotics was a massive unicorn that got bought by Amazon, and Amazon is really driven, automated manufacturing warehouses.
Yeah.
There's still, I think there's use cases there. It's bringing robots into the real world that I'm not sure when that'll happen or not, but that's the tricky part. And but yeah, inside of the warehouse where it's highly controlled and everything, you can automate anything. But yeah, I don't necessarily think you'll see robots outside the world in the next 5 years, but I may be wrong. And I think when they do happen, it'll happen quick, and it'll be like cars where, in 1901, everyone was in a horse and carriage, and then 2 or 3 years later, a lot of that was just totally gone, and all these cars popped up
Right.
out of nowhere.
Are there like innovations that you are personally most excited about seeing in the next 5 years?
I think there are. The next 5 years could be pretty interesting, and we've shifted from this bull economy to a more bearish economy, and there's been a escalation of military conflicts around the world.
Yeah.
So a lot of the funding, we do a lot of this at Capital Factory.
Yeah.
We help technology for the Department of Defense.
Mhm.
And so I think like what plays out in these geopolitical conflicts and the elections this year play a huge role on what is coming. And frankly, if we continue to escalate conflicts and that's where the funding goes, it's not as much excited as it is like it's very serious and like we need to like go buckle down and get the job done and create these technologies, defend things that we need to do as a country. I think I would be excited if there's a way to do that without everything escalating.
Yeah.
And I hope you'll see a resurgence of what we called Web3 and crypto. I agree there may be some bad actors in that, but I think there will be a new iteration of the internet. There's a lot of fraud, a lot of scams on the internet. Someone's going to fix that. It's a massive opportunity. I'm not sure if it'll happen in the next 5 years or not, but for us to like the consumer internet to take the next step, we have to secure it.
Yeah.
It's just that now it's very, very insecure.
Thanks for sharing that. And do you have a favorite innovator?
My favorite innovator is probably Bob Metcalf, I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Been at the Ethernet. Very biased because I got to know him.
Yeah.
But Ethernet's pretty useful.
Yeah.
I like innovators that like have the little piece of the puzzle that makes it all work. A lesser known innovator that I like is James Watt.
Okay. I might have heard that name before.
He created the separate condenser, which was a component to the steam engine that really made it economical and like enabled the industrial revolution. So yeah, James Watt invented the separate condenser.
Wow.
So yeah, it's one that people may not know.
Wow. I'll have to look him up.
The funny story about that is I ended up being pitched by like his great grandson. No joke, and he had the same name. told him about the paper. I wrote a paper about him. I told him, I sent him the paper.
So is he down in Austin or somewhere in Texas?
He lived in Mexico and because he was in
Mexico.
pitching.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I want to say, yeah, South America somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah, I met him at Capital Factory in Austin. Serendipity.
Serendipity. Wow. I'd like to probe you a little bit more about what exactly he was pitching, but we might not have time for that on this show. And so a good portion of our audience and participants at the Entrepreneurship Center here are obviously startup founders and entrepreneurs. So as an investor, would you have any practical advice for the students here who want to pursue entrepreneurship?
Yeah. Understand why you want to do that. And I think people go into entrepreneurship with different motivations. They also go into it with different understandings of what entrepreneurship is.
Yeah.
I think very few people go into it really knowing what it is and having a deep. I think you really have to get into the trenches and go through the struggle to grasp that in a big way. So yeah, I mean, and the only way you can do it is to dip your toe in and figure it out. But yeah, it's like, what are you really doing it? Is it because you want to change the world and solve the big problem? Is it because you want to make as much money as you can? Is it because you want to what is it? There's a lot of different reasons. I mean, it's I like doing startups and entrepreneurship because it guarantees you an interesting endeavor and an interesting day. There's always someone with a thought-provoking concept or unique tool that makes it interesting. It gives you a curveball. So yeah, it's like, why are you doing it? And yeah, I think most people will realize that it's not exactly what you might want to work for a startup. You might want to invest in startups. You might want to do a small business. That's the other thing you need to understand if you're going into entrepreneurship. There's lots of different types of entrepreneurship. Only a small portion of them really, small portion of new businesses are a fit for venture capital.
Yeah.
To be a moonshot, most are more small businesses. People may think starting moonshots your best chance at making a lot of money. It's probably your chance of making a lot of money is probably more of the small businesses. Your chance to make the most money is through moonshots. The other way to put it is, do you want to be rich? Do you want to be famous? Or do you want to be powerful? Right? The old saying, people.
Interesting. I think that was amazing advice. And lastly, where can the students here find you if they have a great idea that they want to share?
Yeah, you can reach me on LinkedIn directly. I'd also say check out our podcast at Capital Factory, which I host. It's called Austinpreneur. We talk about everything happening around business and startups and state of Texas. So yeah, listen to Austinpreneur on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you get your shows.